All right, then. Well, welcome back to On the Sideline. I'm your host. Here's my guest today, Wissahickon Boys head coach, Wissahickon Boys basketball head coach, Mr. Kyle Wilson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
So, I mean, if so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about last season, and then I'm going to do this season, and maybe we'll if any extra time we'll continue on. So, start off. I mean, last season it was kind of slow. Picked it up. What were the early issues in the year?
Sometimes it's tough, and I think probably one of the best ways to say it in a way that many people can understand it. If you looked at the Brooklyn Nets when they had Harden, KD, Kyrie, like just because you have three or four really good players doesn't guarantee success. You got to be able to play together. You got to be able to share the ball. And I just felt last year we struggled early on to identify roles. We didn't. I don't think we were as active and in sync coming in off of the fall league and summer league a little bit with guys knowing their role. I thought there was still a lot of guys trying to establish pecking order, so to speak, and that's tough. And we also went with more scores. We changed the lineup, and it was tough. And I had to give a lot of credit to Braden Ryan. We moved Andrew Slackman, who's not a better basketball player, but a really, really good defensive player, into the starting lineup, and things started to change. We just struggled having 4 or 5 scores out there on the floor, and having another defender and keeping only 3 scores gave us more balance. And we went on that tear where I think we won 10 or 12 in a row and went from being like 2-8 to being like 10-10. And then, going into the last 2 games, we struggled. But, I constantly think back, that's right, we were only 10-12 last year. It didn't feel like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those first 5 or 6 games were so early on the season, and we played so well, through the middle and the last part of the season. It just felt like, man, had we just gotten that last win against PW, which we lost to, and had a shot at the buzzer to do that, we'd have been in the playoffs, and it would have been a different outcome, sitting at 500 and beating the team who eventually became the district champs at the end of the season. So, we understand. I think there's a common, ideal between all the players that, like, hey, we got to get off to a good start, and we got to play together as a unit.
Now, I've heard you mention, PW in the final shot. But when I was, at the game, and this happened in multiple games, you guys were up big at half, and then you kind of like started to fall apart in the second half. Well, what were the issues going into second half? Like, were people just tired?
I don't think fatigue. Now, our kids work really hard. I don't think fatigue is ever. There's different shots you take when you have a lead and shots you take when you're down. And if you're up, you don't need to fire a ton of threes. You want to work for good shots. But like I said, when you have sometimes players that are all, well, he got a couple shots, I'm going to take, like, you're taking more shots about individuals and not taking shots as a unit. And it's something we just continue to stress and work on. And if you look at that last game against BW, nobody cared who got the shots. Everybody made the extra pass, but it worked. And it's just sometimes a challenge more years than others getting kids to that point. And I don't know if it's an AAU thing. I don't know if it's just sometimes with the team. It's the first time I think in a while we had seen any struggle, especially long term, with for us. But it was definitely a battle trying to get guys to, share the rock and play as a unit. And not bad guys, all great kids. I love coaching, but just we struggle to play as a unit, and you got to play with chemistry.
Now, going into this season, I mean, we're not going to move in, but like just talking about this season, you're losing Andrew Slackman, as you said, great defender. Earl
Yeah.
Stout, one of the better point guards on your team, and Jalen Williams, who was, probably one of the better players, probably maybe the best player on the team last season. How are you guys going to, move forward with those absences of those 3 players?
Well, those are tough ones. And then also losing the 2 transfers with Owen Coughlin and Will Kirkpatrick.
I forgot about them
Also,
too.
yeah, because there's a 6'8" guy who was our starting center for all the games, and a 6'4" point forward in Will Kirkpatrick, who's probably our second best defender. It's been really a joy to watch the guys not fuss and whine about who's not here and be so excited about who is here. They're excited to have Gabe Lassiter back, who didn't play last year due to an ACL tear. they're excited to, go into the season with a young core of guys that are hungry and healthy. When I looked at it this summer, we went into the Upper Gwinnett League, the Christopher Dock League, had a ton of success. We just lost this past weekend in the competitive edge Final Four playoff championship there. And look, they're fall leagues. It's not a big measure, but going into a season as a coach, you can see certain things that a team does and has. And this team really has a strong fight and a desire to win. And they sort of have that attitude that we're all we've got and we're all we need. And, I think there's a bit of a chip on their shoulder that, they want to win, in spite of the fact of the guys that one graduate and especially the guys that went away for greener pastures, So they've been doing a really good job. Braden and Dom have been carrying a heavy share of the scoring load. Gabe has been phenomenal with doing whatever's needed, sort of being that sort of Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, defender, rebounder, slasher. And then we've had a really pleasant surprise out of Nico. Thank you. Nico at point, coming off of a great freshman year with him having a phenomenal summer and pretty much putting a stamp on, he feels really strongly that he has earned and should be the starting point guard. We'll see. I mean, it's still tryouts and everything, the formalities you have to go through, but they've just played outstanding. The tough thing with basketball is it's no longer, it used to be an era where you have tryouts and then you put a team together. Basketball is year round. So, you sort of have an idea of who you have and who you don't. And we've got a nice core of guys and some really nice guys in supporting cast with Mason Stelzer and Mike Malton is really, we had a lot of guys that realize, hey, these other guys are gone. They're not walking back to that door. We've got to work this summer to really improve in areas that, we're going to be pressed upon when the season gets started.
Now, you kind of went over a lot of things I was going to mention, Gabe Lassiter, the offseason, Nico. But I want to go bigger on the offseason because I was able to attend one of those games, and I saw you guys were moving really well. Now, you guys have played in a bunch of offseason, including players who themselves have been able to, do outside stuff. How have those, outside teams helped contribute into the Wissahickon?
Well, as I mentioned, earlier, areas we struggled with last year, one, building chemistry. Guys pretty much have a good idea. They're like, hey, we need to get touches to Dom. We need to get touches to Braden. And we all need to fill in. And when guys have that ideal and that attitude, and that understanding, that knowledge of like, this is where our strength is, it makes things, somewhat easier. But guys also have to know, like, hey, if one of our two key scorers goes down or is in foul trouble, other guys need to be ready to step up. And I think they communicate better. There's just some things that they've done that just really have made this a really impressive offseason. It doesn't guarantee anything of the regular season, but it's nice to see things coming into place that show signs that we can build on some things and possibly be successful.
Now, the Vacchiano twins, I mean, we kind of talked about both Dom and Nico individually, but now they're playing together. Do you feel, there's better connection between the two brothers on the team, or do you feel there's a little more separation between those two and others?
I think it's funny when you said first Vacchiano twins, because I'm thinking like, oh, I don't know if I could deal with two Doms, but now having the two brothers play together, it's neat. They're both high energy guys. They both play in intensity. Their dad was a Wisp basketball player. I just look at them as just tough Hamburg kids that, they love representing their community. They love the guys that they play with. But it's interesting to watch because they're such different players at that same stage. Like Dom, as a freshman and sophomore, was more of a perimeter, big shooter, more of maybe a 2-3 or even a 4-player force on JV, where Nico is a point guard. Like the ball is things really happen well when it's in his hands. He's great at playing downhill. He has explosive first step. And, I think our toughest thing with Nico is he can be a dog defensively, but our biggest thing this summer was trying to keep him from getting into foul trouble because we need him out on the floor. We lost two very good ball handlers in Earl and Jalon. And then, you lose an Andy Yoon as well. And some of the other, players we had that could handle the ball. You know, it's always a challenge replacing a point guard. That's your quarterback. You know what I mean? So it's been nice to watch Nico. And then also Mason Stelzer both come in and do a nice job trying to fill those shoes of those two guys that left.
Now, something that I haven't heard you mention yet is, the undersized part of the team. I mean, obviously, Owen Coughlin and Will Kirkpatrick both left, who kind of were filling in at center. Now you
Yeah,
have
6'4", 6'8".
Yeah, now you
Yeah.
have Gabe Lasser and Mikey Maltner coming in, and there are teams out there that have centers 6'5" and above. How are you guys, going to compete with that when you guys, like I said, are more of an undersized team?
Well, I think Michael Malton plays bigger than he is. I think he's 6'3", plays like he's 6'4". He's physical. Gabe Lasser to me is like a PJ Tucker. He's a guy that can guard smaller guys. He can guard bigger guys because he's so athletic. Um, but we also, one of the pieces I haven't mentioned is Delmar Talaferro. He's a sophomore. He's 6'5", 6'6". We were thinking Delmar was a guy that maybe next year would be, but because, like I said, guys leaving, we moved him up, and Delmar's answered the call. He's been able to go out there, get us buckets at times. We still have things that he has to still grow and develop, so we'll probably play some JV and crossover up to varsity, and be because he has skills that work well with varsity, but he still has some shortcomings he has to work on, which would be great to work on during a JV game. But he's going to be a really nice player this year and for years to come. So it's just trying to work and get Delmar up to speed as quickly as we can. So we have some pieces there that could really help us that we weren't sure and weren't counting on.
Now you kind of did talk like a little bit talk about the young core. You have a good amount of seniors, but then you have a lot of freshmen and a lot of sophomores. Like, how does it feel to have all those sophomores, juniors, and even freshmen that you can kind of build upon in future years?
Yeah, it's nice. One of the conversations I always have with the kids heading in the tryout, because it's always a tough time. I always say when people ask what's the toughest part about being a coach, it's having cuts. But it's exciting when you look and say the kids are going to put a lot of pressure on me to have to make tough decisions, because we have a good amount of good players, even considering the guys that left. We have a good amount of good players that can play and that can help us. Even some strong juniors that are like, "Ooh, where do we use them?" Or, do you go with somebody younger? But there's some juniors that have just played their butts off this summer that I think deserve an opportunity to continue to grow and develop. Guys like Chris Core, guys like Chris Lee, who was a freshman last year who came along. JV guy, Chris Lee, but Chris Lee, I think, is a kid who could be a strong future for us. He shoots the ball extremely well. He's got a quick first step, So we're looking at these guys. Kaj Jones, who's a freshman. Kaj, is going from 8th grade to playing, primarily varsity basketball. And, he's got some adjustments to make, but he's got a great tool set. Kaj's a 6'2", 6'3" kid who can shoot it, can put it on the floor, plays really good defense. So it's neat when you can see these young guys mess with these older guys and really, work in a way that as coaches you recognize as saying, we can have some success if these guys put this all together.
But how do you see them competing against, teams with more experience? Because obviously you're going to have a good amount of, not a good amount, but you're going to have, some sophomore, maybe one or two freshmen coming in there.
Well,
Yeah.
I look at teams we played this summer, this offseason, and there wasn't a team. Now, obviously, we didn't play PW. It's always a challenge. The pressure they put, that's going to always be interesting. But, in our league, I think we're prepared to handle. I know Abington's sort of in a similar boat. Upper Dublin's probably going to be a little bit more experienced, have some size. But, they're a rivalry team, so a lot of times you just sort of throw that stuff out the window and see what happens on the game days with teams like that. I think we'll still hopefully be stronger than the Hatbros and the Upper Morelands. We played Upper Moreland, just a couple weeks ago in the competitive edge league. And like I said, it's fall league, so I only put so much, weight into that. But they're a team that has a 6'8", 6'9" guy, and we came out the victors. So I think there's ways to still be successful when you lack the height. And, I think we still are a team that will be a force to be reckoned with in our league. I think, we still are a team that can press, that can run transition, that can play a half-court game. And, some pieces are really falling into place this year that I thought would be maybe shortcomings that we had or things that might hurt us. And our guys are finding ways to show that, we might be okay and we might not have to, worry about certain teams that put a lot of pressure or do other things that we might be able to handle ourselves just fine.
Now you kind of talked about PW and Upper Dublin being, while they might be PW obviously is going to be a good team for a while. Upper Dublin, they are normally a good team. This year might be a little less than last year. But are they always more challenging, not because of talent, but just because they're a rival?
Well, I think the tough thing for Upper Dublin right now for us is we have, I'd say prior to the last 2.5 years, I think we split with them. Did we split last year?
You split 2 years ago. Last year they swept.
Yeah, yeah. But prior to that, I think they won twice that one year, but then we had pretty much they hadn't beat us for 5, 6 years. And they know that, you know what I mean? When they went through their 2 and whatever year and their 3 and something year, like they know, like, hey man, we and so now they've had a couple of years where they've had some really strong talent in basketball, football, baseball. They've had a really good core of athletes come through. And that's what a rivalry, should be. I don't like losing to them. I always joke and say I don't even own red shirts because it's Upper Dublin. But yeah, I mean that's what it should be. But that's makes the game fun, going out and playing against your crosstown rival, playing against a PW who is always so tough and so competitive, and you never know what new kid is there each year. So that's I think part of the game, and then the rest of the games are all ones that I think either are toss-ups or possibly we can be favored. And I think in the Perk Valley Holiday Tournament, we may do okay. I saw LaSalle play this week. They're really good, but they don't have like a 7-footer. Nobody I saw that was that big, but they're going to be a good, solid Catholic League team. So in our tip-off tournament, them, North Penn, Downingtown, I think we're a team that's in the mix with all of those teams. I think the one thing that, as a coach who's done this a long time, it's tough to look at is every 4, maybe 5 years, we always seem to make a big run towards whether it's district, states, make it down to Temple or Villanova, wherever it's being held, the Final Four. And I think it's disappointing to know that possibly with, our 6'8" player that left and our 6'4" kid, man, this could have been a year that we could have really controlled and dominated. But, sometimes those two kids are a 2 or 3 game difference. Now our kids know, like, hey, we need to make a difference other places. We need to be grittier on defense. We need to be more communicative on defense. We need to be defensively connected. And I think those are things that our guys have dug in their heels on, and just they play with a grit and an attitude that, like, if you're better than us, come out here and prove it on the court. And it's fun to watch a team that fights and plays hard like that.
Now, bench. I mean, obviously you normally run a 2 or 3 guys off the bench.
Yeah.
And so obviously that can kind of be draining to starters. But this year's bench, how much improvement do you see from last year's?
Well, I think we're deeper in some aspects of guys like Michael Malton and Gabe Lassiter are really solid forwards for us. Kaj is a up-and-comer young player. He does a lot of things that they do. Something's better than one, something's not as good as the other, but he's a kid that if he can grow and mature in the first, month of this season, after tryouts, we can have 3 really solid forwards, and that's what you need down low. And then we'll see what we get out of guys like Delmar and Ben Schwartz and other guys that are, also playing down in that forward position. But at the guards as well, you got Nigel Harrison, who I didn't mention. Like, Nigel can shoot it. Like, we have some guys that really do things differently. Nigel's small. He has actually a really nice deep range 3-point shot. And he does have some things nice off the dribble. You would look at Nigel and think he's more of a point guard, but he's a scorer. He's a kid that on the wing that likes to put up shots. And he's a kid that he goes in streaks. And if he can build consistency, he can have a really nice season, coming off the bench. And that's the same for Mason and a lot of the other guys that we have.
Now, home versus away. Do you like playing in front? Would you rather play, in front of the home crowd, or would you rather go to an away crowd and silence them?
For me, the actual competition of it, I don't really mind either one. I do love playing our dome. It's the dome that I played in. So there's that side of it. And the other side of it, when people also say, what's one of the toughest things of coaching 25 plus years? I always say I hate riding yellow school buses. They're uncomfortable. They're not fun. And they're a little more comfortable after a win, but it is. They're just not fun rides. So at home, at least I'm driving the comfort of my own car to the gym, and that's nice. But I don't mind either one. And we don't play game teams. Upper Dublin's a short ride, Hapro's a short ride, Springfield, a lot of them. Now, this year, I think we play at New Hope Salisbury. That's the first time in the 3 years they've been in our league that we now have to travel out there. So I don't look forward to that. I don't look forward to the long trip to Quakertown, but, I like the ones that are close, whether they're home or away.
Now you're getting closer to the season. I mean, the season's in what, like a month and a half now?
Yeah.
So it's closing in soon. I mean, you still have tryouts, you still got to figure out the starting lineups. I mean, you probably
Less than a month. Yeah.
You probably have a good idea of who you want to start and all that. But what are the main goals going into the season? I mean, obviously it's always state championship, district championship. But other than that, what else are the goals that you have?
Well, for me, I really like to see this team get into the district playoffs. I think that's an every year goal. Like we missed it by a game last year. One or two of those games we flip and we're in there. So it'd be nice to see these guys. And I'd like to see them develop a character that when you walk into the gym, you go, oh, wow, this team knows how to play. Because, we just played a team, Berks Catholic, this past weekend. And it was impressive to watch that when Dom, got hot and hit a few shots and they tried to deny or do whatever. Braden got hot on the other side. And then when they had to focus on Braden and Don, it was nice to watch guys feed or then watch Nico make a drive and Gabe. So it's finding that balance, I think, is going to be a huge thing on the offensive side. And then making sure that one of the things I think has always been a staple for us is playing good, versatile defense. If we are required, or it needs to be, if we find a team doesn't do well against a 1-3-1, we need to be great at 1-3-1. If a team doesn't do well at 2-3, we need to be great at 2-3. If a team stinks against man-to-man, we need to be great at man-to-man. So I think that's something that this team has that ability to do. And, I think I'd like to see them find their identity early and make dents early. I think last year was a tough thing. We had to dig out of such a deep hole. And I think this year, if we can get out to a good start, I think that would be huge.
So would you say you're more of a rather, defensive minded coach or offensive minded?
I would say I'm probably more of a defensive minded coach, which is always kind of funny because my one weakness when I played high school, when I was a freshman in college, was defense was my one thing. Where my coach was like, yeah, you don't play defense really well. You got to get better at it. But I just think it's what wins, no matter what gym you go into, I don't care how the rims are set up, whatever it is, your defense should carry. So, excuse me 1 second. Hey, Rue, can you put the dogs outside? My two labs are wrestling and growling here in the living room. So, but yeah, I think that's, but I love the offensive side of it. I like looking and saying, okay, last year we had to find ways to get shots for two small guards or undersized guards in Earl and Jaylon. And this year now we're looking at two big wings in Dom, who's 6'3", ish, if not 6'4", and Braden, who's a solid 6'2" guard, so it's nice to say, okay, what can we do different? What are things that plays we've run over the last 25 years that we know these guys will get shots off? And that's kind of a fun part of that chess match.
Now, something that Dom mentioned to me when I interviewed him, he said that, there's kind of an identity crisis in the early part of the year because there was, sometimes everybody wanted to score, but you guys learned over time that whoever's scoring, just get them the ball. Would you kind of say it was the same thing, or would you say it's a little bit different than that?
This year?
No, I'm talking about last year.
Last year, that was definitely something else. It was a bit of that identity crisis. We'd have Earl some games go for 25, then you have a game will go for 7 or 8. Jaylon go for a game of 25, and then a game of 7 or 8. We got to be consistent. You know what I mean? And it's one thing to have a game of 8 if somebody else is going off, but we'd have games where we just struggled to score and just seemed like we were sleepwalking. So
you say you need more consistent shooters this year?
Just consistent scoring. Doesn't have to be shooting. Just consistent scoring. When somebody's not hitting, somebody's got to pick up the slack. And I think we have that. I think we will be pleasantly surprised by some of these guys. A big thing is also, though, because we only really have 2 returning varsity players with Braden and Dom, we've got to get these guys reps early of playing at the speed of a high school game because it is different. It's different from practice. It's different from AAU. It's different from pickup. You got to get out there and get that comfort, that ability to slow things down, knock down shots comfortably, and that's going to be huge, I think, as well.
What game are you looking? Well, what game are you most forward? Looking. What? Let me phrase that. Wow. What game are you looking forward to the most?
To me, always the next one. We open up with North Penn. That's the one I'm focused on right now. And then after that, whoever we play, hopefully in the championship of our tip-off tournament, worst case scenario, our consolation, and then, starting into the league play, like I take them one game at a time. I know they're out there. We send out, we try to get film early and stuff, but literally, I always feel like when you look past any team and don't give them the respect due, that's when you get beat. And I take a pride in the fact that it's rare that we've lost to those teams that have been historically below us in our league, but it's because we respect them so much and don't take them lightly.
From the games that I have been to in the past, 2 years, I've been able to go to basketball games. The most, not the most important, but the highest, people that go to the most is Silent Night. And everybody gets to dress up, go to that game.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you guys have lost the last two to Upper Dublin. Is it this year kind of, because I know these seniors really want that win on Silent Night because they haven't had that chance yet. Is it kind of, more, do or die in this time of the year?
No, do or die, but it's definitely one we want to get because, we haven't always done it against, we've done it against PW. We did Silent Night against, I can't remember if it was Upper Moreland or somebody else we've done against Upper Dublin. But I think the guys sort of have it like, no. We want to get Upper Dublin on Silent Night. At least, one time, before we switch and do it against PW or somebody else. But so it's one of those things where I know, they really, they're not looking ahead to it, but I know they have it marked on their calendar. That's a big game for them.
And what other games would you say are really big for you this season? I mean, obviously you said everything.
Abington, PW, those are Cheltenham. Those are historically teams that have always been solid in our league. But, teams like Lower Moreland, Upper Moreland, like you just can't take them lightly. Springfield, those are teams that are just trying to develop, and they put bullseyes on our back. So I love playing in Suburban 1. I think it's a great league. It's a great conference. Our non-league games, I look forward to as well. Central, it's always nice seeing a team out of Philly come. They were a 15-win team last year, and that was a great win to get over them, So, and it's always a good just, competition to see how is our program progressing versus how is somebody else's and how are our kids doing this year compared to another team. So, it's fun.
Now my last question. You've seen great talent come through and out. I mean, Tano, your son, Matt Compass, now Don Vacchiano, and even, other players on the team. Do you see some freshmen, like obviously you kind of mentioned college, but do you see other people or maybe even some, middle schoolers that come up there and say, these are nice grades?
Man, I tell you, we lost 3 kids out of that 8th grade class to recruiting to private schools. But I tell you what, I love the kid Chase Newmeister, who's a freshman. The Weiss brothers are really talented. There's a guard named Malachi Hodges, who's a nice freshman point guard. There's an 8th grader, Tim Weir, his brother Henry's at the high school. I think he does water polo maybe, but Tim, he's a 6'3", 6'4" kid as an 8th grader that, if he stays, I think would be exciting to have him, come up and play with these guys next year. Grant Ajemian, who I hasn't mentioned, who's a really utility knife player for us at the varsity level. He's got a younger brother, Charlie Ajemian, who's a nice player. So it's nice to see some of these guys. There's a kid, Kevin Lucas, that's got some talent. There's a lot of players, that I keep my eye on, sort of watch them from a distance. I try not to get too into them because some kids have already made up their mind, hey, my dad went to LaSalle, I'm going to LaSalle, whatever. So I try to wait and see what kids want to come to West. I always tell we want all of you. But I know, hey, some kids already, it's a family thing or it's a religious thing, whatever they would do. But I think we have a nice core of talent coming up and a nice group of 7th graders as well. So, talking way ahead, but after 25 years, I just always think that way. I'm sure I'll think that way up till whenever I eventually retire. I'm always trying to look at how can I make the program stronger.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. I hope you guys have a great season. I'll attend as many games as I possibly can.
Thanks, Noah. Keep doing a great job.
All right. Thank you.